to the Influence Factory podcast. This program is dedicated to support professionals who have a desire to develop their digital business influence so they can navigate through a fast-paced, constantly growing digital world. We invite newcomers as well as our family of business influencers to a place to play, share ideas, questions, tips, and guidance with other thought leaders around the globe. Sit back and enjoy our program with our host Dean Delisle as he interviews guests. News and commentary is provided by Cait and Jackson Delisle. Power Move lessons are provided by the Influencer Marketing Department at Social Jack. And production, editing, and distribution is provided by the Social Jack production team.
All right, this week's influencer guest is the founder of VU Dream, a marketing and brand agency founded and operating in Boston, Mass., one of my favorite cities to hang out in, working with startups, individuals, and corporations to help customers imagine new future realities in the fields of emerging technology like virtual reality and podcasting, like this podcasting. So I want to welcome my podcasting coach out in the world, Mark Metry. Thanks, man, for coming on with us.
Dean, you're doing a great job, man. It's such an honor to be a part of this.
Yeah, thank you. Well, hey, man, you were our coach, and I want to thank you again. It was just by chance finding, a lot of times when you're searching, you're like, how do I pick the person that we're going to count on and rely on? And you've been amazing as part of helping to formulate this podcast. So again, I want to thank you. This is part of your creation too. So
thank you. Appreciate that.
So you were born in Boston and first generation immigrant from Egypt, which I think is cool, and man, it's like, I think of Boston, it's almost like, the border towns that are like even New York and things like that, where families come in and that's when they make their start. And sometimes they move inward and westward and sometimes they just hang. So is your whole family there?
Yeah, man. So, I mean, my parents left everything behind. They left their family and they just came to America to give me and my sister a better life, hopefully.
Wow. Yeah. And it seems like you've taken full advantage of that because now you're one of the top 100 podcasts with Humans 2.0. So that's super cool. Now, before we get to that, I was intrigued because at the age of 7, you went on local public television after winning an art competition. So what was that like? You're 7. Come on.
Great digging around, man. I've never been asked that question. So I remember just in one of my classes, there was some kind of an art competition where whoever draws the best, whatever it was, drawing, I think they got a prize. I don't even know that you would go on TV. I was a super, super, super shy kid. And it's like when the teacher said my name and I won that art competition, I was just like, oh crap, I'm going to go on TV. And I remember showing up there and my mom came with me and I literally was so nervous. I didn't say a single word. I literally just stood in front of the camera and I literally just held up the paper, the drawing, and I just walked away. It was so funny. I'm going to maybe try to find footage of that, but it was hilarious.
That is funny, and Jackson's in theater and Cait's had her adventures through radio and we've all had that moment. And it's funny, I'm sort of reaching out to the audience here. Does anybody remember that moment when you had that first glimpse of fame and then you're like, oh my gosh, I remember I was in middle school and I took drama because my uncle was the drama teacher. And the first time, I'm practicing these lines and they say, you'll go on stage and literally there's hardly anybody in the audience, but it was the first time that lights were projected at my face and I couldn't see beyond the stage. And I would just remember being so scared and I forgot half of my lines. And then all of a sudden I was just, somebody had said, it was my dad or somebody said, if you get scared, just pause and breathe. And so I just remember doing that. I think I'm in 6th or 7th grade. And I would just pause and breathe. And I said, I'm going to start over. And then I just started over and then, magic was starting to happen. But it was like crazy, the fear that you feel. And to this day, when you're doing, because you do a lot of talks as well, do you have do you still feel that fear on the inside as you're getting up to do that?
That's a great question, man. I mean, for me, like, I grew up with a ton of social anxiety. And so, like, honestly, I still always sort of get fearful, especially like when I'm about to do like some major interview with like this big time person. Like, I think the nervousness is always there, but then I just think it's like a matter of doing exactly what you said, of just like pausing, taking a breath, and then just reassessing and just saying to yourself, like, hey, I feel some of like this negative energy or this nervous energy. I'm just going to try to harness it into, maybe asking the best questions, being in the present moment. And I don't think it ever goes away, but it's just being able to harness it in your own hands. And it really does give you more power, more ability.
Yeah, and so totally relatable to this program. I knew you were going to be running right on time or a few minutes late. And then I said, what's going to happen is Mark's going to probably come in right in the middle of the news or in community updates. And we usually introduce our guests later in the program. And it was awesome because I was like, I had the fear about it, but I was also like, okay, we'll just like wing it. And most of us are trained in improv, and it was total improv. So hopefully you appreciated some of that.
That was awesome, man. I mean, listen, I think that sometimes the best things happen when you do that, when you try to do something new. Sometimes maybe not, but yeah, I think that was a pretty cool experience.
Yeah, and because we chopped this up into segments, it'll be interesting. Jackson's probably thinking, "Oh man, there's another hour of editing, or whatever." Yeah. Sorry, Jackson, but you know what? It may become a thing. We don't know. Maybe we'll have, guest news commentary or something like that. But so as we look at, what's interesting is, take you to current state. You're interviewing Seth Godin, and you're just like on top of it with all these podcast interviews that you're doing. But that's sort of where you're at today. So how did you, did it start at the age of 7, or when did you get this bug? Like all of a sudden, you said you had social anxiety, and then all of a sudden you're like, bam, you're doing podcasts, and you had some things occur that were almost like a pivot to put you in that path. Can you share some of that with us?
Yeah, absolutely, man. So, I grew up as a totally normal kid. I had my issues like social anxiety and like some other things. We've all got our own, fears and insecurities. So, for me, like when I was growing up, one thing that I think was really pivotal for me is like, I got on the internet really young. I began to understand social media and all this internet stuff like back in 2011. So that was...
What did that look like? Were you like YouTubing, or what was it?
Yeah, believe it or not, like I had a YouTube channel. I had 35,000 subscribers. There's nobody on the platform that had like over 1 million. Like they didn't even have a monetization program or anything like that. And like, honestly, I was doing it as just sort of like a fad thing. Like at that time, even though I am a really young guy, like I still remember people telling me like, wait, so you can learn stuff on the internet? Like it was just a completely foreign thing.
You don't have to go to the library.
And so I began to dabble with that stuff really early on. And it eventually led me to an opportunity when I was 15 years old, making like multiple 6 figures from previously not making any kind of money. And when that sort of happened for me, that began to expand my horizons, and it made me understand that there's so much opportunity out there in the world. And then, like the way that turned out is probably by the time I was 18, I just, personally went on a transformation sort of growth journey. I used to be somebody that was over 200 pounds. I didn't really have any deep relationships with people. I just really wasn't proud of the person who I was. And so I just kind of set on like this fiery path, like this blitzkrieg of trying to discover myself and trying to do all these new things. And for me, like the podcast was something that ended up being formed because I had been on this journey of, trying to incorporate all these nice, healthy habits, trying to spend my time the best way I knew how. But it's, it's very challenging. It's very difficult. And so I just thought like, hey, how do I go about getting in contact with somebody like Seth Godin or somebody that is a top author or a top expert in this specific area that I personally need help with in my life. And so the podcast just started as a way to like get the information I need to generate my own results in my own life. And as episode came on, I began to connect different dots. I began to take this information that I got and incorporate it and apply it and then come back. And it's been a crazy journey. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. And I think one thing that attracted me to you is the fact that you called it Humans 2.0. And we talk a lot, we're all about activating the humans within a brand and humanizing the brand. That's, our influencer development program. And really, whether you're a brand of one or a brand of, 100,000, it doesn't matter. We train companies like GE Nationwide, some big companies, but we love the entrepreneurial spirit of somebody that says, I'm ready to be out there and I don't want to do this alone, and so I like the activation of the human element of social networking. So give me your perspective on that now, since you're the guy with Humans 2.0.
Yeah, man. I mean, like I'll tell you this, so on my show, I have people that, like Seth Godin, like Neil Patel, that are at the top of the top for people that we know of for like marketing. But then, I also have on my show like professional athletes, and I have
the shortest basketball player in professional basketball player. I thought that was like Muggsy Bogues or something. And then I saw that episode and I was like, oh my gosh, I got to hear this. So it was cool.
Dude, that's exactly it. And it's like, and there's like world-class chefs. And it's like, for me, my show isn't about, highlighting myself as an expert and, trying to put on this image that I'm like perfect and, people should only look at my information. I'm just trying to put other people on, not because they need it, but just because simply I need it. And it's like, if I can go into a conversation, no matter who that person is, no matter what industry they are, no matter what field they're in, and tap into like this common human denominator that I know for the most part, people listening, whether they're dads or accountants or I don't know, mechanics or they're marketing people, they're going to be able to tap in and get something out of it. And it's like, what I've learned, man, is like social media, all this podcasting stuff, what it's really doing is the most powerful kind of content is providing a mirror to the other person. It's somebody that's looking at their phone and they see a post that maybe asks them an indirect or a direct question, and they just they think about it. And like that takes up sort of like cognitive real estate in their brain. And then they actually begin to, think and care. And then I think if you extrapolate, that's what leads to people making decisions like buying things, selling things, making that decision to subscribe or to listen to that podcast. So I think it's all about hitting like that very, very genuine, valuable human denominator.
Yeah, I love that. And we've always, we've always talked about the power of authenticity, about being real and authentic and genuine. And so what's cool is we've always had our loyal folks that jump onto the live segments, whether it's on the Facebook channel or it's on, Zoom. And over the years, we've always had sort of this lunch and learn approach. And both my parents were teachers. So no matter what business I had in the technology space, in the CRM space years back, it's always been like, how can, things are moving so fast. You think about when, no matter when you got into technology or business, how fast our world moves. And there is no one person that knows everything. But if you're willing to collaborate and partner and bring people together and share, I think that's sort of a good basic common thing. And it feels like where you sort of got hooked as well, right?
Oh yeah, man. Yeah. 100%. I mean, like I learned very, very fast in my business that, it's not about being the jack of all trades. It's just about like getting the smartest people, getting the best person at whatever it is that you do, and recruiting them, just like you said, finding a way to collaborate or partner, because that's what I think life is all about. I don't think that we're born as I don't think we're born as people that are just gifted and able to do everything. I think it's about I think we're born with like maybe one or two or maybe even three things that we're really, really, really exceptional about. And then it's just about, filling the other pieces of the puzzle. I think it's about, if you look at a baseball team, like, you can't be the pitcher and the receiver and the catcher. You can't be all these different positions at the same time. And it's just about, okay, who is the best pitcher that is out there that is going to complement my skills, so we are a coherent, conducive team that just like generates and creates the best sorts of results for, whoever it is, our client, our partner. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. Speaking of baseball, I think the Red Sox have a way better chance than the Cubs this year. So I'm just throwing that out there. I do follow both teams really close. I think actually Rick or somebody else was jumping into a big Red Sox. Are you a Red Sox fan since you're right there?
Oh yeah, man. You've sort of got to be when you live here. Actually,
they'll kick you out, right?
100%. Do you know who Wade Boggs is, by the way?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I met him like last week. It was pretty cool. But,
did you?
Yeah, I met him last week at like a charity event, and it was a very interesting event.
That'd be cool though to have him on, right?
Oh, dude, 100%. I totally blanked out, and I totally should have asked him, but I'm sure we'll see each other again sometime.
I know. I was telling Cait, I met somebody last night. Have you had a Richard Branson on yet?
No, I haven't.
So I met like the right-hand person to him for Chicago Virgin Hotels. And she's like, anything you need, I can connect you to Richard. I can do this and that. And I'm like thinking in my mind, and I'm like, I couldn't even get the words out to like take the next step, but I've got her card. I've got her info. I got the connect. And she said she'll set us up with event space and all this other cool stuff. So, I was just building a relationship, but I was like, man, that would be like a big ask. So backing up a little bit, a lot of the people that are listening to us, possibly want to, move like you did and like we did and actually produce a podcast. And we have a lot of people come to us on this. We've held many workshops on it and things like that. And one thing, when you were coaching us, I was just totally inspired, and we'll get to tools and things like that. But people that are thinking about, like, they're in the beginning stages and they're like, wow, first of all, how do I get booked on a podcast? And then we're going to go into how would I build a podcast? So can you sort of share your view of the world on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that with 2019, we're living in, I think every single kind of company, organization, personal brand, they've got to have some sort of a podcasting strategy. And what I mean by that is, I don't necessarily think that, they should pull the trigger and start their own podcast if they don't want to, but you've got to have some kind of strategy, whether that's, your CEO getting on, or whoever is in charge of PR and media, getting on like the top 10 podcasts within your specific niche or industry. I think that's critical. And I think that, when you begin to sit down and start this podcast, I think you've got to understand that it's really about the long-term game. I don't think it's about, producing a podcast for 6 weeks and then just saying like, all right, guys, we did it. I think it's a very, very much long-term strategy, and you can utilize a podcast in so many different ways. I don't necessarily think it's just about, having a top 100 podcast and the goal of your episodes being seen by as many people as possible. You could use the podcast as like a business development tool, and maybe inviting on certain decision makers at companies that you want to interview for your podcast. And like you said, Dean, build that relationship on top of after. Whereas, if you were just to send them, maybe like a prospecting email, they may or may not respond to you. And so that's one strategy. Another company that I'm working for, they are a relatively like sort of a legacy corporation, very big, and they're trying to find a way to recruit young, new talent into their organization. And so their podcasting strategy was like, okay, what if we have our CEO,
right,
start a podcast about, not this specific industry, but like they're in the real estate industry, but talk about, human potential and human improvement, and talking about like the real underlying deep sort of like tectonic plates that are under each human, because we know that a lot of younger people listen to podcasts as well as old, and they might be interested in that. And if they see sort of like the insight of what the CEO is talking and doing, that might help them recruit and apply to, get a job at that company. Like I know a company here in Boston, very well-known marketing company, Drift. They do a ton of chat bots. They have events, and I was actually at one of their events once, and I was on one of their cruises after, and I was actually talking to a mom of one of the employees, and she was telling me, oh yeah, my daughter works at this company because she first found out about them through the CEO's podcast, which is called Seeking Wisdom, which has nothing to do with marketing or any of this stuff. So it's like
real estate. Yeah, right.
Exactly. 100%.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. And I think that's what it is. It's about, the human potential. I mean, that's what we see, is that glimmer in every person when we shake their hand. It's like, oh my gosh, they have this powerful untapped network. And then we'll find out nuggets of someone's story. And we're like, people need to hear about this, And we, the saying, everybody says you have a book in you, And so, it's one of those things where, we like to just let people know that we love hearing your story and we want to know more about you. It's that interesting factor, or human curiosity factor. And I love that you focus on mentally healthy lifestyle. I think in a world of tons of technology and a lot of technology going on, that we just need to focus a little more, on our well-being, if you will.
Yeah, man, I totally agree. Like, I think what's happened, Dean, is that the individual has now, more power ever before in human history because of technology. Right. And it's like, with power comes a ton of responsibility. You can use technology in sort of a haphazardly unconscious way, and it'll almost like abuse you. It'll it'll sort of, the parts of yourself, the parts of your character that are not well disciplined, that are not built on a strong foundation, technology can really squeeze that out of you, right? It's kind of like money. You give somebody who is, let's say, mentally poor, you give them a ton of money. You're going to see very quickly they run out of that money right away. They use it to kind of, abuse certain things, to buy things, bad things that they were never used to. But then it's like, you give a good person money and, they use that for amazing benefit. And it's like, I think that is really what's going on. And I think, just like the conversation we had before, like in 2011, 2010, this stuff was still super, super new. It wasn't even quote unquote mainstream yet. And I think because of the sheer speed that's happened, I think like we haven't had a time to like slow down and be like, whoa. It's like, what is the actual conversation? Like, what is the actual protocol? What are the actual methods and principles and guidelines that each human being should have, because we have an infinite amount of opportunity and power at our fingertips today. Like, I know personally for me, I focus a ton on my mental and my emotional. Like, I generally speaking, like, I don't use my phone for like the first couple hours of the day. I like to get that time to myself. For me, like, I shut off all notifications on my phone except for like a few contacts, some emergency contacts, because it's like, when I'm living my life, I just want to be focused on right now. I don't want to be, pinged on the like, if somebody wants my attention, like, they literally need to, tap me on the shoulder or something. and like, there are some other aspects, and this is really interesting, especially coming from somebody like myself who's in the virtual reality industry.
Right.
And that's like a super, super, maybe even existentially speaking, very strange sort of technological environment reality that VR is going to take. And I just think that in my life, I've learned that technology is just it's a double-edged sword, and the new powers, the new abilities that it's giving us reshift the conversation almost every single time for humanity. Like if you were separated from somebody 10, 15 years ago, you couldn't contact them again. But it's like, imagine 10 years from now where you could hop into a virtual reality and see, I don't know, like your grandma that's living in Peru right in front of you as if there's no difference. And it's like,
Right.
With all these new emergences, we've got to have a new human conversation that makes sure, we put humans, the individual, first before all these little nifty gadgets and these apps and things like that.
Yeah, and don't get me started because I'm a time travel geek. So I think that VR is going to be our first glimpse into, like what you're saying, virtual time travel. But I've seen some of the under the hood technologies with VR and things like that, and it's just amazing. Some of the pieces, especially with all the data that we have in the world.
Oh yeah, especially. I mean, I think when you look at it, especially in terms of marketing and advertising, like. If people, I'm not saying this is 100% true, but if people spend a decent amount of time in a virtual reality in the future, whatever it is that they're on, like a headset or a neural implant or whatever it is, like you're going to know exactly what people are looking at. You're going to know even what emotion people are going to be feeling when they look at something. You're going to be able to see like, their eye twitch, their face move in this certain way. And honestly, it's a pretty scary conversation to have. But I think that the sheer amount of data that we're going to have, I think it could potentially maybe even provide in some insights, some information to solve some problems that we have going on that we just don't maybe are even conscious of, or we don't have solutions for in our world today.
Yeah, I'm intrigued by that. I've always been in this virtual meeting space scenario like we're in now, and I was an early adopter. I built my .com was like a virtual school. It was a B2B university, and we were delivering this when bandwidth was stretched, when people were still on dial-up and it was just really nasty and hard. And you'd have like the max headroom thing where it was like, people, it was all jerky and pixelated, and doing the best you could. And it was interesting. Even back then, it was about, being able to see someone's face and being able to hear that voice and make that human connection. And I think it's really in a space that, if you can't be side by side with someone, it's the next best thing. And that's what I like about, just to wrap it back to podcasting real quick, is the fact that I think if they can hear the CEO's voice, or they can hear the people within the organization, again, humanizing the brand, it is really interesting to see the difference when someone can actually hear the leaders or the people within the organization speak, and what a difference that makes for everyone that's connected to the organization, whether they're a partner or customer. You agree with that?
Yeah, I think absolutely. And it's like, really, Dean, when you break it down, I think the real power of podcasting is that, you get to, whether it's you sit down or you pop in your headphones and you go for a walk, or you're at the gym, or you're just living your life, you actually now get to listen in on like a potentially 45-minute, 1 hour conversation. And I don't think we've ever had that with technology before. Like we've obviously had video recording, we've had TV, but it's like when you begin to think about what is it actually like from a communication and honestly a psychological perspective standpoint of this person now gets to listen to somebody else for that long enough of a period where you can get in a lot of deep and intellectual topics that you may or may not pick up from like a 60-second LinkedIn video post or like a tweet. And it's like that in which I think is the real power. I think like the number one the best content for a human is obviously video because you can see
Right.
the person. But a lot of us are busy. A lot of us can't be looking on our phone. We're driving, we're commuting, we're at the gym. And I think podcasting is sort of the bridge to make like a super human technology communication work.
Yeah, I love that. And you heard, I don't know if you heard Jackson at the beginning rattle off, and thanks to you, we got on Spotify and Castbox and all these other things that I don't even know what half those platforms are. But it's just funny that it's by convenience that we all connect and attach to ways that we get our entertainment or our news today. It's a whole different world. And I think to have that voice in the world is again such a great connector. In fact, with our team, Cait talked about this little community that we have for the Business Influence Alliance on Facebook, and it's sort of a fun little playground and sandbox. And we invite clients and members and our interns and other people to just practice. Come in there and practice a webcast or a Facebook Live or whatever it is that you want to play with. We just don't want you pitching stuff, but if you want to come in and teach people and be really a true influencer and thought leader, come on in and play with us. And so I think we're going to see more and more of that activated in the world where it's available to whoever wants to play. You agree?
Yeah, 100%, man. And I think like what I always think about, Dean, is just like, I think what technology is doing is I think it's enabling more communication. It's enabling more access. And it's like, dude, there's like an 11-year-old, very, very talented kid in like India that doesn't have access to Facebook, that doesn't have access to the information that you'd be sharing on this group, that, if he heard it, he could then take that, apply it in his own life, and then come out with some kind of like world-saving solution to like fix cancer or something. And I think that's the direction that technology is going. And I'm really glad to see people like you and your team, Dean, that are enabling and facilitating this process happen in the world.
Yeah, and I think we're just always giving people a chance. It's like everybody deserves to have that opportunity and that chance, and so that's again one thing that you influence with us is there's some pretty cool. If you're getting into podcasting and any type of delivery of media, you shared some pretty cool tools with us along the way. So, are there any that you want to share with the audience today of things that like, okay, if you're thinking about doing this, at least start here and check these tools out?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think if you're going to be doing a podcast remotely, I think that getting somebody on video, kind of like on this, is the best because you see a lot of like facial expressions. You see a lot of like natural body language that can give cues for conversation. Probably another tool that I think is really beneficial is, and this is another good piece of advice of like, I think that if you want to start like a great podcast, I don't just think it's enough to create awesome content and just put it up on your podcast. I think a great way to get new listeners is to leverage social media, and not in the sense of like, just tweeting and saying like, hey guys, episode 16 is live with a link. I think you've got to be a little bit more interactive and almost give people like a gateway for your podcast. And if you can make like a 60-second promotional video. And for that, I personally use a tool, a website called headliner.app that makes it super, super simple. When you can do that and somebody on social media is just like scrolling through and they're like, wow, I just like picked up like a really great nugget just out of this 60-second snippet. I wonder how much I'm going to actually learn and benefit if I just listen to like this 30-minute or like this 45-minute free podcast. And that's the way that you get a crazy amount of listeners, just by doing that time and time again, adding up those numbers. Yeah.
Yeah. We love that Headliner. That was a great one that you turned us on to.
I'm so glad.
Appreciate that. Now, what about influencers or people that have inspired you along the way? So, if you've interviewed so many people on human potential and things like that, who are some of the top go-to people that, really, really drive you?
Yeah, absolutely. So one person that sticks out, Naveen Jain. He, I don't know if you knew who he is, but he wrote a book with Richard Branson.
Right.
He's a entrepreneurial legacy, even though he came from nothing. And I think that Naveen really just demonstrates this whole concept of abundance thinking, this concept that is sort of against the natural human nature of scarcity, of we have limited resources, we've got to hide them, we've got to store them up because they're going to run out and people are going to take them from us. But I think what he begins to provide and what you begin to see in what he's doing in the real world is like, he's got a space company called Moon Express. He's got a healthcare company that is doing something unlike no other. Like their main mission is to make chronic illness an option in the world. And it's like, I think that I'm not trying to plug my podcast or anything, but if somebody were to listen to like the 45-minute podcast episode that Naveen and I did, I really do think that it will fundamentally change the course of somebody's life just because of the way that he's talking, like the way that the ideas, the topics that he brings up. I don't hear any other person doing it, and he's actually leading by example. Another person real quick is what's his face? Ed Milet.
Oh yeah, right.
Ed Milet is a really great guy. I think he's like ranked in the world's top 50th people under the age of 50. And, one thing that he really demonstrated is, if you were poor and you're unhappy, when you're rich, you're probably going to be unhappy too. Like there's a level of income that you can get where, yeah, money does make a difference if you can't pay for rent and you can't pay for food. But after that, if you're just going along and you're saying like, man, my boss said this to me, I'm ungrateful for this thing happened to me. And then somebody gives you like an extra, I don't know, $100,000 a year. Like you're still going to be that same person. Like you might learn some things through it, but I think like both of those lessons of just kind of like abundance level thinking combined with the practical reality of just being grateful for your life, being grateful in every moment, whether you've got, $500 million in the bank or whether you've got five, that is really like the key element here. And when you do be more grateful, you really do begin to actually imagine things that will pop up in your life to be grateful for. It literally reprograms your mind. Like there's this thing in our brain called the reticular activating system.
Oh yeah.
And I'm sure you know it, a lot of high performers know it. And it's like the best analogy is like you buy a new car and then now you see that car model everywhere you drive. Right. Whereas, like a week or two, you never even like saw that car
you
anywhere.
Think it's so unique. You think you're the one that got this cool model. And then all of a sudden you see them all, right?
Exactly. And like the point is like you can begin to then do that for other areas, for other elements in your life. It starts with an experience of an emotion, and it starts with being grateful towards that opportunity. Because I think like another great guy who I've had on that ties really into this is like they've actually done studies that show if you are complaining, if you are ungrateful, if you are being negative, it shuts down like 90% of your brain that is created to detect opportunity. And it's like when you combine those things, like the best thing that could be great for your life, your business, is to be grateful and open and opportunistic, even when there are a lot of problems, even when there are a lot of struggles, even though there are a lot of issues that you're confused about and don't really know, because that's what I think really what counts. But those three just really stuck out. Yeah.
Yeah, that's huge. And one last thing before we wrap up is on that point that you just made. I was actually just had queued up the one that you just talked about, that episode. But it's the amygdala hijack when up here you get all this stuff that is I call it garbage that has entered your system, of how you've developed up to this very moment. There's as much greatness and things to be grateful as there is garbage. And it's funny how our mind plays tricks, and that I call it cha-cha, gets in the way and those voices come up when you're
I love
like,
that.
and it just like pulls you out of there. It's like giving you the hook off the stage, it's like, what, and you're right. It's, and I say it creates an awareness in the moment where you're like, we tell people, it's like our scouting and drafting system. It's like there is an opportunity with the person right before your very eyes. Why do you need 10,000 more followers? What about being in the moment with this person? There's magic in there, So I love that.
I love that. You explained that beautifully. And I think that when you just begin to look at it, like, a great quick lesson that my dad taught me when I was really young. So I was working at his pizza store. And so I was taking an order on the phone, and there was also a customer in front of me because I was manning the register. I was being a cashier and also the phone. And what my dad told me is that, you should always pay attention to the person that's right in front of you. I think that's definitely applicable for most of the cases, maybe not all, but it's like, when in front of you, you've got an opportunity, you've got a customer, and it's like, it's important to really nail that down before you go ahead and like take another order or get on the phone with something else. So I think that for me is just really, really, really pivotal, and for a lot of other people in their own lives. 100%. I love the way that you articulated that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. All right. So with that being said, before we let you go, I'm going to invite Jackson and Cait to jump on and share some things that they learned along the way. And then I'd like the listeners to really, Rick Gosser chimed in and said, gratefulness begins in the mirror, which I love that. It's like, bam, it's right there, right? Just be grateful for you. So a shout out to Rick on that, who is emotes positive energy all over his posts on the internet, and has been a member of ours for quite some time. And so I'd like people to start chiming in, whether you're in the podcast on social, but if you are grateful, put it out there, man. Tell people, I really appreciate so-and-so. And we have something on Fridays we call the gratitude post. And it's tell people, just pause on a Friday and think about someone you met this week and thank them. Give them a public shout out and go, thank you so much for that inspiration, And so we love that. But Cait, how about you? What did you get out of this?
Well, I was really excited for this episode because I follow Mark online, and I'm also a podcaster, radio personality turned podcaster, because I all of a sudden had a public transit commute in the city of Chicago that I had to fill some time with. Work emails. And I also do podcasting on the side, and I'm thinking about launching my own at the moment. So it was interesting to hear your story and how you go about it, and how you're an advocate for brands having a podcast for, brand awareness. And that's something that I think about all the time. And it's led me to new podcasts and new influencers to follow. And, always I like to be like learning and listening. And so I love podcast for that reason. And I recently went to go see a live show for a podcast that I follow, and I tried to get them to sign my book that they had written, and I said, I'm a fellow podcaster, and their response was, oh yeah, like who isn't these days? I think your outlook on it is so different, and how you can use it as your voice as opposed to just, there's a difference between using it to get your message and your voice across and your brand, as opposed to just like an outlet to hear yourself talk. And so I love how you kind of frame that, and it's in line with, our values here and our values that we coach to our clients. So just thank you for sharing that with us.
Wow. I love that. I love that so much.
Yeah. Jackson, how about you?
Yeah. The biggest part for me was just, something I try to live by is just paying attention to the person in front of you. The fact that you said it really resonated with me, because that's something I work really hard at, because, through Monday through Friday, you're getting tons of emails, you're bouncing between different projects. And then, when people are on the phone, it's like, all right, hurry up, but like, you got to sit down, you got to think, okay, I got to be in the moment. I have to be with this person. And I really like that you mentioned that and you didn't leave that out, because that's such a big thing. And then again, thanks for turning us on to Headliner, because I've mentioned it, the past few weeks on, the podcast. So it's, it's really helped us out, and I really like, using it. Very easy to use. Highly recommend to anyone who is, starting their podcast, putting out and promoting their podcast. But it's all thanks to Mark. He showed us that tool and, really helped us.
And coached us a whole bunch more. I mean,
Yeah.
there's like countless things that all of a sudden we went through. And Mark, I don't know if you've heard, like we've had some new voiceover done. We have our own music that we've licensed and, sort of just given it a whole new flair ever since you came along. So from the bottom of our heart, definitely want to thank you for that. And then we always like to thank people that engage with us. We like to shout those people out, and we give them a Starbucks gift card. So we're going to announce that here in a minute. And for all of you that are out there listening, Mark has inspired or touched you in some great way here. We want to make sure that you share that with somebody that you care about. Be that influencer, be that thought leader, and really pass that on. And we're going to link all of Mark's websites and social media sites. It's easy. It's markmetry.com. It's the website's easy, but we want to make sure that you follow him and listen to some of his podcast, amazing interviews. And we really appreciate that. But please make sure you pass what you learned on today and share that with somebody else, or maybe even on social media. We love shout outs out there, right, Mark? So give Mark a good shout out there. And Jackson, who's our two Starbucks winners today?
This week in the Zoom platform, we have Carlene Lewis. And then on Facebook Live, we have Adam Feather. So congratulations. And remember
the Wolf of Wrigley.
Wolf of Wrigley, yeah. So remember to take something you've learned from this podcast and, share it with whoever you decide to, share that Starbucks gift card with. So
yeah. Right. Keep on giving. Keep on giving. All right, Mark. Well, from all of us here at the Social Jack Studios to you out there in Boston, Mass. And I can't wait. I have a new friend to visit when I come back out there. So, and if you're ever in Chicago, hit us up. We'll make sure you get taken care of.
Definitely.
So thank you, Mark. And thanks to everybody out there that's listening. And we look forward to seeing you generating more influence online. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Woo.
Thank you for listening to the Influence Factory podcast. We welcome feedback and suggestions. You can provide these by visiting our website at www.myinfluencefactory.com. And if you are interested in Social Jack's 90 Days to Influence program, you can simply go to 90daystobusinessinfluence.com and simply ask for the next steps. While our program airs regularly on Zoom webcasts and Facebook Live on Wednesdays at noon Central, we invite you to download episodes on your favorite channel: YouTube, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Spreaker, SoundCloud, and who knows where else in the future. We will also provide occasional on-location live streams with special guests that we will announce in our community Facebook group, Business Influencer Alliance, as well as on all Social Jack channels. Our mission is to help you build your digital business influence with this podcast, as well as inspire, educate, and entertain those who are hungry to collaborate in a cool place with cool business professionals just like you.